created. This project is called The Other Woman, and it's a script that's very much based around behaviours that can lead to domestic abuse or that are emotionally abusive, essentially. So the piece follows a main character protagonist called Lara, and she is someone who meets this other person, and he's called David.
So here are some recorded conversations to do with research and kind of explaining the vision. I had a number of conversations with individuals and creatives who had more expertise than I did in that field around how we could execute, or how eventually, when this got brought to life, how we could execute that through visuals and all these different components and elements, and essentially how I was explaining what I could see and how I thought it would play out on the screen, and also then working on the characters and developing who they were and how they could be represented.
So the supporting log line says, "The ideal man is hard to find, especially when he doesn't exist." And this is indicative of the experiences that Lara has around this false persona that is presented to her through David. Now, essentially, the point is that David's character is a emotional abuser. He is narcissistic, and he basically leads her into this false sense of security and false sense of relationship.
He turns out to be a master manipulator and is someone who is really just selling a lie and living a double life. And throughout, there are certain moments where there are what are called triggers, where it makes the audience feel slightly unsettled, and it can be a comment or a behavioural aspect, and something that I'd like to really be able to demonstrate visually.
So this is a pilot episode, and this can be anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes. I wanted to aim for a 60-minute pilot, whereas if that was commissioned for such as ITV, then that would come in around 45 minutes because of adverts and things like that. But for streaming, I went for the 30-minute with no adverts, so that is reflected within the length of the script, and so that it can be developed into a series or even longer episodes. I wanted to keep this within the constraints of traditional TV pieces, TV drama in particular, and I did think that the values of ITV did stand out to what I was trying to achieve, and some similar programmes or programmes with similar subject matter, such as Angela Black, also seem to kind of fit that sort of narrative around what I'm trying to say. As an artist and as a woman who's experienced these kind of situations. In terms of the visual elements and the music, there was quite a heavy influence from surrealism. I quite like that sort of style and exploring that style, but this fit really well in terms of what the story I was telling. It's almost a fantasy, and I was really inspired by the recent works of Bad Cinderella, which is like an alternative retelling of a fairy tale fiction, which is being challenged and turned upside down, and inspiration from the likes of Billie Piper, who is exploring anti-rom-com, those kind of anti-narratives that are making headway within the industry at the moment. And I think that with this, that is reflected a lot in sort of like the lighting. It's meant to be quite neon focused. There's a lot of contrasting colours between pink and blue to indicate sort of like male female in that traditional somewhat limiting labelling, but to kind of also then progress the pinks onto a red, which signifies danger, and blue for harshness and almost the bar lighting that we see in the jazz bar. And again, floating between that dream state, what is reality, some of the conversations being mirrored from dream to reality, and the implications around that. There's some element of sexual violence and sexual perceptions of women, and that is why the jazz bar scene is kind of meant to be a little sort of grungy and kind of maybe even a little bit seedy, and the lighting is really harsh and it's quite dark, and there's talk of alcohol and the strength of the drinks and why they are served in that particular bar and the effect it has on people, which again is has lots of insinuations and connotations around other issues relating to domestic or just gender violence and gender abuse. The main song that really informed a lot of the visual elements in my brain was Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down, and a lot of that is about, it's kind of like those contrasting images that it sets in my brain, but also, you know, kind of the distinction between one person and another. And in this context, there are two very different people in David and Lara under the surface, and also you have the other woman, which is literally representative of Lara as the other woman, and but also his other partner who is revealed. She's also the other woman because he's not living a true life, he's very much leading a double life. So it's also about kind of like that split distinction between the two as well. Although it's highlighting female experiences, because as a woman that's all I can comment on really, but you know, it's not to say that that is the set stereotype that men are always the perpetrator. This is just, again, from one perspective and one voice that can be told, but I think that a lot of the content can hopefully be universally applied, and hopefully that can bring some insight to a variety of audiences, not just for women. Throughout the script, you really see moments of female friendship and the value in friendships. There are some male-female friendships in there as well, like within the office, in terms of when someone's poking fun at another person, they'll kind of defend each other, and I thought that was quite important to tell from both female relationships perspective and also male to female relationships. Throughout, there is a friendship between Lara and Elle, who are essentially best friends, two best girlfriends who have each other's backs absolutely and definitely. But there comes a point where I wanted to highlight the sort of isolation and distance between the two, because that does tend to happen, especially in abusive relationships. But I didn't want it to be so apparent that Elle wouldn't notice. She definitely is abrupt in terms of she says it how it is. She's very much there to be that person who always brings her back to reality, always brings Lara back to reality and says, this is what's going on, and she kind of prevents that distortion in Lara's perspective of what she thinks she's being pulled into. And this is where I was influenced somewhat by the verbatim theatre, because that is theatre said how it is said in the moment, and I felt like it was important to kind of convey the fact that actually when these situations arise in reality, they are very different to what we see on screen in terms of the portrayal, or they can be, and also rather than it being a fictional scenario, it's meant to indicate that these situations can happen, and they are very much semi-autobiographical. There was various different conversations that happened that very quickly brought me back to reality, and highlighting the importance of that support network, whatever it looks like, you know, whether it's family or friends or colleagues, kind of talking to people and reaching out, even if it's just you're telling them about your day, which Lara does a lot with Elle, and the importance of that conversation. I know that I have my own experiences and I've heard other experiences, and I've built this script based on those foundations of stories, particularly from women, around issues and subject matter like this that should be told in a more truthful and honest way. A lot of the conversations that I experienced very much informed a lot of the script, which was translated into a dramatic dialogue. But you know, it's very much based on a lot of the conversations that I've had and experienced and witnessed in the news and in my personal life as well. I particularly wanted to focus on emotional abuse because I think it's one of the most invisible forms of abuse and probably one of the least recognised. I did quite a lot of research after it had come to light that I was going through a sort of certain situation, and a family member signposted me to Clare's Law, which was brought to my attention when I was going through similar
struggles, and it's also very much about incorporating those aspects and elements from conversations within the script as well, which did inform a lot of the character voices that have come through. Going forward, I hope to keep on improving and developing the script. So thank you so much for listening, especially if you've got this far into this virtual seminar and pitch. I really appreciate it, and please do send me any questions or get in contact